Did you do it here?
Lisa.
Oh, perfect.
Order 722. And we'll start with public comment. Laura, do you have anyone signed up? No.
Right here. I'd like to apologize for the people that had to wait. I'm hoping in the future we can schedule things, maybe not right before the meeting. That was kind of a train wreck in scheduling. Thank you.
Any other public comments? This evening, we don't have any matters that require board action, but we do need to go through our superintendent's report. Lisa will be seated in just a moment. Would you like for us to move on to business manager while you get settled?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Hit it, Jane.
Okay, don't have too much tonight. Did want to just let you know a couple of things. Just heard back today. As you know, we submitted our DOE 25 a month ago. We got back today. It all seems okay, they said, which was great, so I don't have to make any corrections. The MS 24 is submitted, and so it's a matter of, now that the DOE has signed off on the DOE 25, the DRA, Department of Revenue, just has to go through, see their piece, which is the MS 25, put those together, and then as soon as I have those, I can do the apportionment sheet and let you guys know what's coming up for taxes.
All right.
The other thing that I have is just a bit of news, just in case you're really, really bored on the 20th of October. The 2017 New Hampshire Schools Summit is happening that day, and David Lapointe and I have been asked to speak regarding energy efficient schools. Case in point, the building you're sitting in, and now Mount Caesar as well is climbing onto that chart. We just got our first rebate of $10,000 from PSNH for hitting one of the cost savings benchmarks that we set out to do there for the first year of the renovations. The second year we'll be applying for as well, and hope that we hit that second year for the second piece that we just did. Third item, and I just did this more for informational purposes, a lot of questions regarding the $1.5 million fund balance that we have, which will be used to offset taxes. I did, starting right from last year's annual report and printing out all the documentation, I kind of summarized what comprises the 1.5 million. So I did want to have you have this so that if you're asked a question, you have the answer from me. Okay? So I'll pass this around, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Jane. That's
You're
very
welcome.
helpful.
Do you want to update us really quickly, Jane, on the playground equipment issue?
Yes, playground. Kind of hitting a snag with that. I did order some caterpillars, which I thought were just too cute. I couldn't resist. But in going to order some of the equipment, in order for the equipment to be in code with our insurance company, because we've reached out anytime we've been doing anything, I've been reaching out to the insurance company. For instance, Cutler School put in a brand new playground out there. They use their school accounts to do that. And I reached out to Primex and said, you know, is this okay? Is it in accordance with what we need to for code? And they responded back, and so they've been in touch with me. And so I was gonna go with, you know, just getting something of a Little Tykes nature to go in these, just so the kids would have something, not code. In order for it to be within the code that they ask, we're looking at a $3,000 to $4,000 base, and that would be for 3 playgrounds. So what I'd like to do is kind of, I don't know if I want to have your blessing, but in order for us to put something in there that's going to even meet code, that's what we're looking at, and we only have about $1,500 to $2,000 in each of those schools' playground accounts. So I'd have to have about another $2,000 per playground. And I know Lisa had spoke to me that, I guess, at policy, you're looking at, is it playground equipment or policy regarding that? So in order for us to even be in compliance with what would maybe our proposed policy, we would have to have something more substantial that actually is anchored into the ground at the very least. So I'm not sure where you want to go with this, because this has come up basically since the last finance meeting, and that we've been going back and forth. Darlene Ayotte and I have been going back and forth, and she did print out what she had, and she and I are right there looking at the same thing, same site, same cost. as far as getting something that's in accordance with code. So I'm leaving that at your doorstep.
I think that would start with our finance committee, so as soon as you're prepared with what is this $3,000 or $4,000, what does it look like, and what
Yep.
does it buy, if you would take it to finance and facility, we'll let them push it up.
You got it. Thank you. And what I want to do is make sure that it's in accordance with what you're putting together too as that policy. So,
Yeah, there are drafts of that policy hanging around.
perfect. Thank you. And that's all I have.
We'll move to our student representative report before we get to you, Lisa.
So last week, we finally had our elections, and we have named all of the new officials for student government. We are going to be meeting for student government every 2 weeks now, so that's exciting. We just had posted this year's musical and the audition material for it. The musical is Fiddler on the Roof this year. Auditions will be held in November, and then rehearsals will start after December break. In Wynn, we were presented with a mental health slideshow. Basically, it discussed staying healthy and then recognizing the 5 signs of depression. We will be having a meeting in the auditorium on Wednesday to talk about this further, and we'll be having a guest speaker come in to talk about it as well. And lastly, a couple weeks ago, we had a blood drive. It was very successful. There were a lot of donors and a lot of student donors, which was great to see.
Very good. Thank you, Justin.
Good job.
Lisa?
Thank you. As you know, it is now after October 1st, and so we are working on getting our BOY, beginning of year data, submitted to the state. It's not certified yet. We're still, we have until, I believe, mid-October to make sure that it's spot on. But on October 1st, our total enrollment was 1,673, which is 3 kids more than last year, or 4. I think we were at 1,669. However, as of yesterday, or today, this morning, we are up to 1,675 because we had 2 new enrollees. So they won't count in the boy because it has to be as of October 1, but we're doing okay in that regard. I hope at the next meeting we will have, this data won't be certified by that point, but it'll be certifiable. Don't laugh. And so I'll be able to provide the by school breakout and the by grade level breakout. Just not quite ready to do that yet. Making sure that we still, we're not carrying kids that aren't ours and vice versa. As Justin mentioned, tomorrow they're starting at around 9 o'clock. We're really excited to have Justice Broderick coming to speak with our students at the high school on issues around mental health and depression. He will share a very personal story of his own, and he is sort of the figurehead for Change Direction New Hampshire. And I think I sent you all a link that you could access. And you might recall last year around this time, I attended a conference and heard Justice Broderick speak, and the Southwestern superintendents across the state all got together and got literature, the little palm cards they call them, and we were able to distribute those to all of our students for their families and all of our employees with the change direction information and recognizing the 5 signs. I'm also under the impression that I believe Commissioner Edelblut will be here in the morning as well, so we'll be pleased to have him in our district for at least a portion of the day. I know he has an obligation at noon, maybe if not sooner, but hopefully we'll get to meet him tomorrow as well. And that's really all I have, other than we will have to have a quick non-public under both C and B.
Okay. Board chair reports. I want to let you all know that the New Hampshire School Boards Association has a call for resolutions. What that means is they're looking for ideas from all of the school boards around the state about what can be deliberated at the delegate assembly that happens in January. So there's a due date of November 3rd for these resolutions. Last year, we did propose a resolution. It had to do with IDEA and catastrophic aid. Our resolution wasn't accepted as one of those that would be sort of a topic of interest for that year. But if there's anything that you feel is a really important topic that should be considered by the New Hampshire School Boards Association and then effectively by all of the school boards around the state, please feel free to let us know your ideas, and if it's a matter of helping you to write it up in a way that is appropriate for submission to the School Boards Association, I'll be happy to help you with that. I'm sure others would too. Okay?
Lisa?
Yeah.
Do you remember, was that about adequate funding for catastrophic aid? I'm trying to remember what the exact thing that we put forward was.
Do you want me to read it to you?
Is it long?
No, I have it here. Yeah, it is pretty long, but I'll let you read it if you'd like.
Okay.
It
I was
just
gonna
says, it
s-
says the federal government isn't doing its part as was required in IDEA.
I think it was funding of the actual, in other words, they're supposed to provide it, but they don't actually fund it properly.
Right, right. We're not getting all that we're promised.
I mean, we can discuss it, but I think it would be useful maybe to forward the same thing. Repetition sometimes helps.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Also, the New Hampshire School Boards Association offers to local school boards to come into their own districts and give trainings from time to time. So think about this. If you feel there's a training that's appropriate for our district that we may ask them to come and present, it could be legislative advocacy, something on the right to know law. They've done the basics of school board budgeting, superintendent evaluation, and successful annual meetings in the past. And in fact, they do have a webinar on successful annual meetings that's coming up pretty soon, you know, in time for us to take all of that information in before we actually have our annual meeting. So these are neat things that I want you all to know. You can sign up for them, and if you do, the cost of the program will come out of the school board's budget. You don't have to pay for them yourselves. Okay. I also want to let everyone on the board understand why when there was an email, there was an email that came to you all. It looked as if I had not copied you. And that was intentional because the email dealt with some matter that was substantive. It wasn't just one of those issues where we're planning a dinner or something that's not dealing with public policy. That particular email did deal with public policy, so it wasn't appropriate for the entire school board to be copied on that. Because anytime that you get the entire school board copied on an email, you have a quorum. The law says that the open meetings law legislates the methods by which the public meetings are conducted. Meetings are defined as gatherings of a quorum of a member of a public body for the purpose of deliberating and deciding public policy. The content of that email had something to do with public policy. So it also says if violated, the court can award attorney fees to either party or may void the action taken during the meeting in violation. This is the reason that I can't have board members or me sending substantive emails to all of the board, because we're violating the open meeting law. So I hope that we all understand that and can respect that email's not an appropriate way for us all to communicate with one another. So if you could, please refrain from copying other board members on emails. Thank you very much.
It's
And
fine
that's
for
it for me.
scheduling purposes, though, I believe.
It's fine for scheduling purposes because that's not public policy. All right. Now, yes.
Challenging the chair on the answer that you gave me on that email you didn't want me to send everybody. I need a second, Win.
I'll second it.
I haven't been
You know,
challenged
you sent me an
before.
answer that I had to read off your computer. I asked you for what RSA, what DOE policy, what court ruling, or any other document that says that 5 people can do anything and the board itself has no input into it, nor do we even know what you're doing. You gave me a lot of reasons, but you didn't tell me why we can't do it.
I'm sorry, can you ask me your question again?
You read it to me, you responded to it, but I asked you what RSA, what DOE policy, or any other policy, or what court ruling says that the negotiating committee has complete control over anything that's in there, and that the school board has none.
And
You said you reviewed my stuff and you threw them out.
the answer to Mr. Moriarty's question is policy BDE, the board policy, says that the committees are set up and selected by the board chair at the beginning of each session. What happened last year was on 3/21, we all signed up for committees. We said what we were interested in. Those were the recommendations to the board chair at that time. And he, Michael Blair, brought the notification of committees to the following meeting on April 4th. And we all voted and elected the committee for negotiations at that time. Those 6 people that were set forth on negotiations were allowed to do all of the negotiating on behalf of the board because that's what committees do. And our policy BDE says that the committees are responsible for bringing recommendations back to the full board. That committee will bring recommendations back to the full board.
They won't. They'll bring back a contract, ma'am.
Okay, so right now we have a motion and a second on whether to challenge the chair. Can we just move to vote?
So moved.
Phyllis?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Karen?
Abstain.
Neil?
Yes.
Nick?
I don't even know, we're challenging the chair on what?
He doesn't like my answer that the committee is allowed to do the negotiation on behalf of the board.
They should be.
Is that, can somebody read the,
We're missing something.
I don't hear like a logical, what's going on?
That's not to discuss. That shouldn't be done in this vote. That would be after you either go ahead with it or not go ahead with it.
So we don't need a motion to challenge the chair. We need a motion to support the challenge at this point, right?
No, I challenged the chair because you told me no. You told me no non-public meeting on my request for the school board to vote on my 6 items, and the first time I wrote it, anything else anybody wants to put in.
Your specific challenge is to my decision as to whether to have a non-public meeting on those topics.
And the first time I wrote it, I said, and anybody else's topic that they wish to put in there.
So now we're voting to,
This is why I asked. I'm
I was
not,
gonna ask if you hadn't, so.
I heard one thing from Neil, then I just heard one thing from Lisa, and then I just heard another thing, so I didn't even know what we're voting on here.
Lisa?
Just a point of clarification that for purposes of discussing negotiation strategy, non-public is not an appropriate venue for that. The appropriate venue for discussing negotiation strategy is a non-meeting.
And in a non-meeting, you can't vote.
You tell me how we're gonna put stuff in there. I think you guys are going in a circle. How is the school board gonna put any item in there?
The school board has selected its own negotiating committee, and the negotiating committee does the negotiating on behalf of the school board. Individual school board members can give input to the negotiating committee, but there is never a vote from the full board on specific issues until we ratify. If it comes to ratification and you don't like what's in there, any board member is welcome to express their opinion and to vote against the contract at that time.
Lisa, I think, and I'm not sure I understand it, I think, Neil, what you're looking for is for the school board to give some direction to the negotiation. Like things that maybe 1, 2, 3 that we think in priority,
And that's
not after the fact of negotiations. So I think we're all headed in the same direction.
The negotiations committee agrees with you on that, and that's the reason that we had 2 non-meetings to discuss what the full board felt was appropriate action and appropriate direction for the negotiations committee. We did have 2 non-meetings.
But you stated what you were doing. You didn't review my 8 items. And I guess if the board says no, I guess I own those 8 items and I can put them in the Sentinel. I guess that's what you're saying.
No, you may not. We'll have a discussion about that, okay? Because we can't talk about it here and
Well,
now.
is that a non-public or a public? Or are you gonna do it right here?
It'll be a conversation between you and me
No, it
on
won't.
what's
No, it
appropriate.
won't. No, it won't, ma'am.
We can't discuss with the public right now what's happening behind closed doors in our negotiations.
They're not
with-
client behind closed doors. They're just mine. I own them. There's nothing left to them, because you don't want to talk about them.
It seems like it would be healthier to just ask the negotiations and just listen to this and see if they have any direction to absorb it.
The negotiations team has seen in writing and verbally all of these suggestions that are coming forth from Mr. Moriarty.
Is that true?
And we have an opinion from our legal counsel that it's not appropriate for us to deal with those right now. The timing is bad. So I've obtained the legal opinion, and at Mr. Moriarty's request, I've passed that on to him. I didn't have to do that because the conversation I had with our counsel was it was protected by attorney-client privilege. But I didn't see anything wrong with passing it to Mr. Moriarty. I did that. He read it this evening. So I fulfilled his request in that way.
I still don't know what we're overthrowing. What is going
Point of
on?
order.
Yes.
I don't understand that.
From Robert's rules, any ruling of the chair can be challenged, but such appeals must be made immediately after the ruling.
So what is the ruling that we're trying to overthrow? Or not overthrow? What's?
What is it?
I don't know if she sent it to everybody or just me. She sent an email to me, to my other only computer, that I don't know what RSA that's under, but she can't send it to my regular computer. I don't know what RSA she's quoting there, but did you put anybody on distribution except me?
I put Lisa Witt and our attorney, Anna.
Well, then they don't know about it.
What I said
That's all right, I'll give it to them. Don't worry about it.
What I said to Mr. Moriarty is that the information discussed between me and Anna is attorney-client privileged. It's protected in that way, so I would only send it to his board email address because the board email addresses were created for exchange of confidential information.
yeah.
What
I asked
RSA
him
is
not
that
to
under?
forward it to his personal email address, and I asked him not to discuss it or to share it in writing with any other parties.
Okay, you asked, you're not gonna get it.
And you've just stated that your intent is to share it with other parties.
Well,
Please
I'm
don't do that
saying if you
because I've
don't
asked you
want to
not
discuss
to.
it here and lock them into the school board, then they're mine. They're all mine, and I'll do with them what I want.
According to what you're reading there, what is our appropriate next step? We're halfway through a vote as to whether Mr. Moriarty's challenge to the chair should be
Lisa, can I just help?
honored.
I can't
Yes,
stand it any
please.
longer.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks.
I think what's happened is he's requested a non-public meeting to discuss negotiations matters. The board chair sought legal advice on whether that was advisable. The legal advice was no, that's not advisable. So she said, no, I'm not putting that non-public meeting on the agenda. He's seeking to overturn the chair's ruling on whether or not there will be a non-public meeting to discuss negotiation matters. That's what's on the floor. That's what you're voting on. If you vote in favor of overturning it, then you will have a non-public meeting to discuss negotiation matters. If you vote no, you will not have a non-public meeting to discuss negotiation matters.
Are we talking about non-public or a non-meeting?
Non-public was what he requested in his email.
Okay.
So, you know, that's technically what is being dealt with right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we clear the slate, and now that we know what we're voting on, can we please start the roll call over again?
And can
Are we
you
all in
please
agreement?
clearly state what this vote is for?
A yay is to have the meeting?
A non-public or a non-meeting?
Non-public is what has been
Thought it
requested.
was
If you
to
vote
challenge
yes,
the
you're in
board.
agreement with Mr. Moriarty that it was inappropriate for me to deny his request. If you vote no, then you agree that it was appropriate for me to deny his request. Yes.
Since our attorney's here, could we just ask for all of us to know, are we allowed to have a non-meeting, or does it have to be a non-meeting, or can it be a non-public?
So we're talking about negotiations, right? And under RSA 91A3, 91A2, matters of collective bargaining negotiations are set aside in non-public because they're confidential by nature. So what you really ought to be doing is having a conversation in non-public where there's, as a non-meeting, where there are not minutes taken and there's no video cameras. It's just a meeting where you talk about negotiation strategy. If board members want to say, at this point in negotiations, I think you should head in this direction, let them say it. It's not binding on the negotiating committee. The negotiating committee already received earlier on this year a directive from the full board, and they've moved forward with that. This sort of jumps in halfway through. it's not going to be binding. It's just going to be a person's opinion or a person's vote. And even if the whole board were to say, we support as a consensus where Mr. Moriarty is coming from, still not binding on the negotiating committee, but it does create problems for the negotiating committee.
Yes, it does.
Where all of a sudden they have to change past halfway through the process, and they're already halfway through the process, which is not going to go well for you and really undermines what you've authorized them to do previously.
Nick?
All right, so I heard you say non-public and non-meeting and what you just said there.
Non-meeting for negotiations. It's not a meeting.
So what are we actually voting on? Whether or not Neil can request or whether or not we can schedule a non-meeting?
He
Overrule the
didn't ask for a non-meeting. I told him, no, he can't have a non-public meeting.
A non-public?
Public, but non-meeting.
Who's on first?
The
When?
motion that was made was to see if we were going to challenge the chair, nothing else.
Which is out of order.
That was out of order. It was my misunderstanding.
Okay, I thought that was still on the table, so that's out of order?
There's still no vote on the table.
What's that
We-
order?
There doesn't have to be an approval of a motion to challenge the chair. He just can. So he's already challenged the chair. He stated what he wants to challenge. And now, in layman's terms, if you vote yes, then you want to talk about it some more. If you vote no, then you think it's past the time to discuss it.
Wait a
Talk
minute, wait a
about
minute.
the,
Hey,
Challenge the chair
that's,
means you were wrong.
Something's backed up here backwards.
Lisa,
Change it by
I'm
the
telling you
second.
what it meant.
Lisa.
thank you. So to be clear, the vote is on whether to continue with the challenge or whether the decision that you made was improper. Can you clarify that for me?
Just call it overrule the chair. That's easier to think
Okay.
of that way. The board can always overrule the ruling of the chair
Yeah,
by a simple majority
exactly.
vote. So that's all that really is, a request, overrule the chair. If the majority votes in favor, then you have a non-public meeting to discuss negotiations.
Thank you.
Non-public or non-meeting?
No, he requested a non-public meeting,
Okay.
and she denied. So that's the subject of his motion to overturn.
And just,
That makes it
and
out.
request a
Lisa, if I may
non-meeting.
continue, so just to
Well,
be
we just did that
clear,
in the non-public.
One person at a time, please.
just to be clear, we have received legal guidance and we've heard from Attorney O'Shaughnessy this evening that non-meeting is the appropriate venue to discuss negotiations and not non-public. Is that correct?
That's
Point
correct.
of order. That same attorney said I couldn't vote in a non-meeting, so I asked for a non-public.
It's correct that you asked for a non-public meeting. We
Because the
can't,
meeting before, when we were in a non-meeting, that Anna lawyer, sorry, I don't remember her last name, said you can't vote in a non-meeting.
the crux of the issue is that you want the full board to vote on these items that you've put forward, and we
Yes, ma'am.
can't. We can't in a non-meeting, we can't in a non-public meeting, because we can't have a non-public meeting. It can't happen. Okay? So we need to move
Have a
forward with our
non-public to vote
voting.
on a non-meeting, I guess.
Let's do the first vote.
There's only one vote.
Yeah.
And the one vote is yes, if you agree with Neil that I'm wrong. No, if you think I've made the appropriate decision.
I don't like that way you answered that. I think it should be that just the decision whether to challenge the chair. Didn't say you were wrong, it just said that we're challenging your
Well-
decision. Then you discuss whether it was wrong or not.
It's nothing personal. I'm challenging the
Lisa?
chair and her decision.
I think, I think Attorney O'Shaughnessy, suggested we look at this as overrule versus challenge. So a yes vote would overrules Lisa's decision to deny the non-public meeting. A no would support her decision to deny the non-public meeting.
Just like he said it 5 minutes
Did I
ago.
get that right?
Okay. It's clear to me now.
Okay.
Request for the
And
vote
I
to start
think
over.
let's do roll call for this one.
Phyllis?
No.
Winston?
No.
Karen?
No.
Neil?
Yes.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
No.
Cheryl?
No.
Bob?
No.
Rob?
No.
Eric?
No.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
No.
Lisa?
Abstain.
1.075 yes, 10.927 no, 0.998 abstain, 0 absent. Motion fails.
Like I said, I own them now.
I'd like to make one comment.
Yes.
I voted no for this because I think it should have been no, but if Neil would like a non-meeting scheduled, I think it'd be very appropriate to do that, even if you don't want to show up. If he wants to discuss something in a non-meeting format, I'm happy to attend
I
that.
can submit one for next time if you want.
I will be denying any requests for a non-meeting. It is past the time for us to submit any sort of new proposals to the unions. We're past that time. In our ground rules and negotiations, we set a time frame, and by the third meeting, any new topic needs to be out on the table by that time. So we don't have time to put anything new on the table. What's done is done. The negotiations teams have done their job, and they've followed closely and carefully considered everything that the board has asked them to do.
Just as soon as any one of them counters something, then you're open to add something.
I think you
I was the
have a
president
fundamental
of a
misunderstanding.
2,000-member local. I know a little bit about negotiations. Just as soon as
Neil?
they send something back as a counter, then you can counter.
Okay. Neil, I'm going to ask you, please don't move forward on releasing your document to anyone. We need to speak with legal counsel
Don't
before.
ask me, please, it ain't gonna work. I'm gonna do with them what I want. You don't want them, I'll take them.
All right. Okay, let's have a discussion after the meeting. We need to move on to committee reports. We have finance and facility first.
We have not met since the last meeting.
All right. CRC?
That's a bit of a deep discussion. In the interest of time, I'm going to suggest we save that for our next meeting.
Okay. And so we will. Cheshire Career Center.
We are meeting next week,
Breakfast.
The 10th, that's
like
right.
the 10th, I believe, at 7:30 in the morning. Be the first one of the year. And I will be attending,
Of course you will.
of course.
Extracurricular, anything from you guys?
We met tonight. We had a meeting. We're working on the setting criteria for the memorialization, milestones, and different awards that are given through the school. It's going to take a while. There's a lot to cover there.
Thank you.
We'll be
Education? I'm sorry.
I was just to say we'll be meeting again before the next board meeting at 5:30. Before the next November board meeting. I'm sorry, at 9:30 at 5:30. And that would be November 7th, and that's in room 608. We're going to have that.
And education hasn't met, so that brings us to policy.
Lisa?
Yes.
I have one question about education. There are a number of student test data that I guess is going to be submitted through the Education Committee. I'm very concerned in getting that information personally. I remember the last issue that we had with the SAT score. It was PSATs, or I think it was SAT scores, earlier this year, and I think it was something like 6 months before the board received it as a whole, and it was something that we essentially couldn't react to whatsoever. So,
Jeremy?
timeliness of the reporting information, I think, is as critical to this board as timeliness of financials.
Maybe getting a sheet of when we can expect it.
We already have.
All right.
Gave
Well,
one
for
last
the-
year.
So
Was I here?
Nick wants to be certain that the test data that's pertinent to our students is brought to the Education Committee in a timely manner.
Yeah, I haven't had, Betty and I haven't set the agenda yet, or Betty hasn't set the agenda, but I planned on being prepared to present to Ed on Tuesday next week of the SBAC results for science and reading and ELA. They just came off of embargo, so they're just now public.
Okay.
You can see all of the preliminary results online. They're all available and public to you.
For
if you-
SBAC.
If you go to the SBAC, yeah, for science, reading, and math. And I'll also, the only other thing I have that's public at this point is, thank you, AP.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right, policy. We have one for first read, right?
Yes, we have one policy before you for first read. This is policy DBJ. Reminder that where the first read, we're bringing this to you as informational. In our second read at our next meeting would be the time to discuss and ask questions. So This infomercial is just that, an infomercial. The requested change in this policy, you can see that it's handwritten in. It is simply the dollar value that we would authorize the business office to employ when doing a budget transfer from one budget line item to another. That's an increase from $1,500 to $3,500 per event. So we lay that before you, and at our next meeting, if you have concerns or questions, we can discuss them then when we make a motion to approve as written.
Very good. And that brings us to the manifest. Betty, do you have the numbers for us? Let's start with 1617.
I'd like to move the manifest for year 1617 in the amount of $16,325.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And 1718,
One moment, sorry. Is there anyone opposed? And abstentions? Thank you, go ahead.
and then 1718, $2,015,524.20.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Next meeting's agenda. Right now, we have we have a second read of a policy and
You want the
CRC.
minutes, Lisa? The minutes.
Yeah, the minutes, I'm sorry.
I'd make a motion to approve the public minutes of September 19th.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Stay.
Very good. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right. Make a motion to approve September 19th non-public minutes of 8:22 PM.
Second.
Is there any discussion on those? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
So far, for next meeting's agenda, I have that the CRC is going to discuss warrant articles in plain English, and we also need to have a second read for DBJ. That's when we'll have our discussion on that one.
Lisa, have there been any warrant articles that we're going to be reviewing, new ones other than the standard ones?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No. And
As of tonight, none?
as of tonight, no.
Okay.
And they typically filter through finance and facilities first. Also on next meeting's agenda is a discussion of the apportionment formula. I didn't receive any requests to discuss that this evening, so we will have it on the agenda for next meeting.
And since we will have met education, we can at least include in the packet the test results.
Thank you very much.
Good. So Jeremy, if you could be here for the next meeting to talk about some of the test results when education brings them forward to us, just with explanations. Thank you. All right. Any public comments?
Well, Lisa, I'd like to add something to the agenda, or at least have a discussion about it. We're starting to get the reports of the health of the physical facilities in the schools. I'd like an update as to, just from Dave, when we should expect the other ones that are still out there. And also to have a brief discussion on a potential freezing of spending money on physical plant at any of the schools that are being reviewed until we have all of the reports at a certain dollar value.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, October 5th.
That's when we'll have them?
That's when Dave will be starting in Gilsum with the architect engineer and heading down south. So
Great.
that's when it's scheduled to be on site.
Great, thank you.
Good, I'd update you on that.
That agenda item might be premature then because none of them will be complete on October 5th. But I think that's the update you were looking for, right?
Well, I'm looking for the update, but I'm also looking for having a discussion, to be honest, of is there a dollar value that we essentially want to put a cap on in terms of spending to any physical improvements to any of the facilities prior to having all of the information on the health of all of the schools that are being studied?
Okay,
Point of order.
got it.
Point of order.
Yes.
You know, you've got 2 or 3 articles sitting out there that the voters said up to 3 years. I don't know how many are still open, Jane, but I know there's got to be 1 or 2. So we better know what those are before we say we're not going to spend any money on the buildings. Because the voters said up to 3 years.
We'll discuss that in our next meeting when, under that agenda item. Lisa?
I will bring you a report that gives you the 3 years in question. I was going to be, I don't think I brought it to Facilities Finance because I had just
Well, sometimes
updated
you bring
it.
it, sometimes you don't, but I know some are
Yeah.
still open.
I had just shared it with Lisa, Catherine, and Jeremy, and I was going to bring it to Finance Facilities. It gives you a 3-year look at where we are, what's been spent, and what we did just return like 1,400 or 1,500. I didn't put that in that surplus, by the way, but that was what was left from one that just lapsed. And I can have that for you.
Thank you. Any other agenda items? Okay, so that's 5 things for our next meeting. Any public comments? Seeing none. We do need public, or non-public sessions under C and B, so.
We could do B first, that would be great.
All right, good.
Or no,
And
sorry, C first. That would be great.
we'll
Did I
do
hear
C
you
first.
that we're going to stick after this, after the meeting? Is that a non-meeting, or is that a brief discussion?
Regarding the hearing that we had earlier.
If it's regarding the hearing, it would be non-public.
So that's a third non-public that we'll do this
We
evening.
can do that all under the same C.
That's pending legislation, so that would be out. All right, if we could ask the public to step out, we're going to go into non-public now. You can be dismissed. Thank you so much.
Or public comment.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to move into non-public under section C.